Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Ranching Reboot, the podcast that plays the tune of transformation in agriculture. I'm your host, Red Hills Rancher. This episode made possible by my amazing patrons on patreon.com/Red Hills Rancher and my awesome subscribers on Spotify. They're the ones keeping Ranching Reboot on the air. It's fall here in the Red Hills and hunting season is in full swing. If you're still looking to get some birds or maybe a deer, be sure to check out Landtrust. For all you landowners, personally, I like to check out what other farmers and ranchers are offering to gain some inspiration for what I want to offer. Click the link in the show notes or on my link tree to learn more. Episode Q&A and the polls are back this week, so be sure to check those out on Spotify. If you're not on Spotify listening, please be sure to give the other show supporters some love. Grassroots Carbon, Magic Mind, Bobo Links from Blue Nest Beef, and the Audubon Conservation Ranching Program. Just click on the links in the show notes to learn more. Another link you'll find in the show notes is for my Ranching Reboot Discord server. It's a place where fans and friends can hang out and chat about whatever's on your mind. Discord's pretty easy to use, either on desktop or on mobile, so what are you waiting for? Come join us. On this week's episode, we're turning up the volume on Tyler Tobald's switch from music and monoculture to diving deep into the rhythms of regenerative farming. From the high notes of cover crop benefits to the baseline of land and labor woes, we're covering it all. Tune in and turn a new leaf on your agricultural practices. Hey, you want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money. All in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. And when you want to take your conversations with fans to the next level, Q&A and polls are the best way to get them talking. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. Best of all, it's totally free with no catch. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started today. Hey, buddy, how you doing this morning?
Oh, living the dream.
Understandable. How's the weather been up there for you?
Dry, and with a side of dry and about 20 inches of wind.
Okay, that sounds pretty familiar. So, Tyler, why don't you tell everybody where you're at real quick and a little bit about your operation? Get us going.
Well, I'm Tyler Tobald with JTech Farms. We farm crops and cattle up here in Cloud County, Kansas. We're 100% no-till operation, utilizing cover crops, and just trying to improve on everything 1 year at a time.
Okay. How long have you've got quite a history with cover crops, correct?
Yep.
How long?
We've been this year will make 11 years total that we've been utilizing cover crops consistently.
Okay. Now tell me a little bit about you. Are you from there in Cloud County?
Not really. I was born in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Mom was in the Army back in the day, and very long story. Mom ended up meeting my dad now in a dating magazine, and they got together, and we moved all the way out here in the middle of nowhere, Kansas.
So your dad's from there in Cloud County and your mom's from North Carolina, and they met in a dating magazine.
Dating magazine. Yeah, it's like a boomer version of Match, I guess.
Okay. Snail mail version of Match.com. Got it.
Yep. Yeah. Moved out here when I was about 5, or no, I guess 4. And then after that, raised up all around here ever since then.
You ever been back to North Carolina?
No, I haven't. It's on the bucket list. Actually, no, once to visit my great uncle Frank, but that was only for like a day or two.
They got a lot of trees there.
I've heard that.
It rains there every once in a while too. It's kind of nice.
Yeah, I don't know what that feels like.
Yeah, yeah. So you grew up there in Cloud County, grew up on the farm. What's your story?
Well, growing up, uh, I was quite the gifted musician back in the day. Like, actually, you can, and on one side here, you can see the piano. On the other side, you can actually see my cello case. But
Okay.
I grew up playing all sorts of instruments. Looked like my career path, my future forward is going to be the music world, and went to Kansas State University, looking into going into the music world, thinking maybe performance professor, something like that, and ended up graduating with a bachelor's of arts in bassoon performance, of all things.
I'm not even sure I've ever actually heard a bassoon play.
I had a video the very last time that I played my bassoon before I had to sell it. Uh, it came across my time hop the other day. I'm gonna have to find it and put that up on TikTok, because that was the last time I played it before I said goodbye to it. I had some medical issues crop up towards the end of my college time, which ended up delaying my graduation by a semester, and I burned out hard. Like, I almost just straight up just left. Parents were like, "You are this close to the finish line. Just get over it, get home, and then get healed up, and then we can figure out what the next step is." So the nothing puts the fear of God into your conductor the most when you walk up to him with a bloodied reed and you start hacking up blood in the middle of a concert, saying, "Hey, we're going to need to move this second half along. I need to go to the hospital."
Okay. Sounds like some sort of respiratory issue that's not very much fun.
No, no, not really. Still
Hey,
bothers me to this day.
okay, okay. So how do we go from a degree in bassoon performance to cover crops and cows?
That it was me trying to figure out what was next for myself. I had no idea where to go next. Like, that was my whole life.
So the
Like,
plan
growing up,
was go to college and play music.
yep. And I didn't know what to do next, because I healed up and slowly got back into it again, and started playing with different groups again, started getting my chops back up, and then it happened again. Middle of a concert, hacking up as hard as I could. I couldn't hardly finish the concert. It hurt so bad. And at that point, my whole world crashed. Just everything that I thought I was, the whole future that I had planned just crashed on my head. And parents were like, "Okay, you need to figure out what you want to do next. You need to just stay here, help on the farm, try to figure out what you want to do next. You want to go into the repair side of things, what you want to do." And in those 4.5 months that I spent healing up and working around the farm, I had more fun, worked harder, and learned more about myself in 4.5 months than I had in 4.5 years at college. And my dad had pretty much just given up on me coming back to the farm. At one point, I actually told him, I said, "Don't leave the farm ground to me. I'll sell it." I was, because growing up, a lot of our teachers, counselors, everybody told us that there was no future back here, and
I
we
grew up
were
in
saying,
rural Kansas too.
yeah, and they're like, "Go get your 4-year degree or you're a failure." Well, I finally learned that wasn't the case, and I walked in one day. I was like, "Dad, what would you say if I wanted to stay home and farm with you?" And he almost fell out of his chair. And then began a very painful learning process. I ordered some books, started learning. Dad gave me the opportunity to rent one of his pieces of ground just to kind of figure out what I was doing. And slowly but surely, I went from being the dumbest guy in the room to halfway knowing what I'm talking about. And along the way, stumbled into cover crops. My uncle was big into those, but never could figure out how to really utilize them well. He was kind of hit and miss with them. And then for the most part, gave up on them as a dead end, and I didn't see it quite that way. So we kept pushing, kept changing, and all these years later, now we've finally found where they fit in. We've changed our whole operation to go around them.
Okay. Just so I kind of understand things. When were you transitioning out of college, and like how much time was in there before you started doing cover crops? I guess is what I want to know.
Oh, let's see. That would have been 2 years. It would have been, or yeah, well, year-ish, I guess, year to two. My uncle was already starting to work with them a little bit before I graduated college, and my first thought on them was they're weeds. They're going to use all your moisture.
What,
Thing I hear a lot nowadays.
understandable considering where you went to college.
Yeah, yeah. And then I think it would have been 2 years after I came back. I talked Dad into putting a whole quarter section of cover crop in by basically bribing him, saying, "Hey, I will pay to put it in. I will find the seed. I will, even if I have to buy every single individual seed myself and mix it all up, which I pretty well did, and I will pay to put it out. If you like it, pay me back. If you don't, we don't have to have this discussion." And it was a gamble, and it paid off big. He absolutely loved it. And then the following Milo crop behind it that next year was the best Milo he's ever raised, and he's been farming since 1971.
Wow. Wow. You mentioned some books earlier that you started reading books. Do you remember what any of them were?
Some of them were just your basic college textbooks that I got for some friends of mine that were in school for ag that they had left over that they couldn't get bought back because they went to a new edition. So those 3 words in the new edition obviously meant the old one was useless now.
Yeah, yeah. We changed the title of a chapter so you got to buy a new book for $550. Thank you.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. So that first year cover crops you started with, you said a quarter,
Mhm.
and that went well.
Yeah, it went really, really well. We didn't section it off or do anything with that. We just took the whole dang herd of cows, threw them out there, and we grazed it down into almost down into the dirt. It was overgrazed that year, but Dad noticed that the cows were happier, they were healthier, they were barely touching some of the mineral. They were just, and they weren't drinking a whole lot of water. He brought hay bales in, they were barely touching them. Like, Dad was like, "This, I see where you're coming from."
Bro, this is weird. Cows aren't supposed to do this. This
Yeah,
is wrong.
yeah. Cows are happy grazing in December. That's weird.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, go ahead.
uh, after that, we tried figuring out some different ways to make it work. And of course, at this point, I'm all in on it. I'm all, save the soil, save the environment. I'm thinking just purely from that side of things. Whereas Dad's thinking, how can I pay for these things? That's just another expense. And then I come up with some sort of like lavish blend that was going to cost like $50 an acre just in seed. And Dad looked at me and he goes, "You're insane. There's no way to make that pay at that cost." And I argued with him quite feverishly too. I'm like, "You saw that it worked. Why won't you get in on this?" And he's like, "Because it doesn't matter if you save the world if you can't pay for it." And I'm like, "Because if it bankrupts you in the process, you're not saving anything."
He has a point.
Oh yeah, it was 100% valid. It felt like somebody hit me in the head with a book at that point because I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I went back, reworked it, and came back to him with an option that stayed at about 24, almost $25 an acre in seed. And he's like, "That's better." Now with inflation, we try to stay under 30.
I mean, it seems like what was $30 5 years ago is about worth 35 cents today.
That's no joke.
We went, I don't know what it is. Like, we put fuel in our car yesterday. I got a new like little diesel crossover SUV, little BMW
Mhm.
used. Like it's fancy, but it's been well loved. 35 miles the gallon.
Nice.
So, I mean, it's not bad. I was sitting there filling up a diesel at like $4.49 a gallon and thinking, wasn't this just like $2 a couple of years ago?
Yeah, every time I pull up to the diesel pumps, I hear my wallet screaming. It's just I with filling up the semis and everything. I don't even look at the thing anymore. I just put the thing in, hit go, and then I'll worry about it later.
It's just money. It's just money. We'll just make more of it, right?
Yeah, we'll just print more. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. But so, I watch the cost of diesel and I watch it rise. How how are you planning on dealing with fuel price increases in the near future? Like if diesel goes to 6 or 7, $8 a gallon, how does that affect you?
I've got a couple of different plans if it gets to the point where we can't run a. I've seen a couple of different people move from cash crop strictly to cover crops and cattle. There's a guy down by Assyria that does that exclusively now. He just gave up on his cash crop operation and moved everything into cover crops and cattle. And he also has, I believe, sheeps and chickens that he follows him with too. I can't quite remember. It's been a minute since I watched his lecture, but that is the break glass in case of emergency plan, where all I have to worry about diesel with at that point is just enough to run the plant and tractor. And at that point, we'll start section grazing everything, or we'll just be grazing everything year long, with the exception of maybe just a little bit while we're calving.
Okay.
That's that's not the optimal plan. I've got a kind of a soft spot in my heart for the cash crop side of things. I'm hoping eventually that uh, good old Uncle Sam will get out of the way and make industrial hemp a little easier to work with, but I'm not holding my breath.
What did you mean when you said section grazing? Can you maybe
Just
paint a picture in my head?
take all the fields, break them up into different paddocks. Like a quarter section, I'd probably break it up in four into just basically a giant pie. Put the tanks in the middle, and then just work one section and just slowly move them around a little at a time.
Okay.
Paddock grazing. I started calling it section grazing, and I don't know quite where that came from.
I just wanted to hear how you defined it so everybody else could kind of get an idea of more specifically what you're doing, because there's so many different terms for so many of the same things. There
Yeah.
might be 80-90% overlap, but maybe you're doing something a little bit different than I'm doing it and we're both calling it the same thing. But yeah, um I didn't really mean to get you all messed up with the $6, $7, $8 diesel question, because I
That's all
don't
right.
have an answer either. And listening to you kind of sketch out your plan, like everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yep.
But at least you've got a direction to head when things start getting bad.
Yeah, I like having contingencies. That's one of the reasons why I love cover crops so much. They're a built-in contingency plan for us. That's for like years like this year. My corn silage this year was absolutely abysmal. Made 6 tons of the acre. Just there's not much in there. And I'm like, if I had to start feeding first part of October, I'd be out of feed by the end of the year. That's with how many cows and calves and stuff to keep feeding on that. That's not tenable. Then we got all of our cover crops, which is the only thing that actually grew well this year. And there's our contingency plan. We're going to graze our way out of this disaster of a year.
Why do you think the cover crops were the only things that succeeded with lack of moisture?
The I, I give all the credit really just to the fact that it's a multi-species blend. The this year's thing, believe it had 23, I think it was 23 species in it. And I try to pick and choose from all sorts of different things. With one fails, others usually tend to step up and fill that void. Like this year, there was a couple things in there that absolutely sane foin was one of the things I had in there this year. It burned up. It couldn't handle it. It could not root down well enough, and you can't find any out there. But the sedan tillered out. It kind of filled in some holes. The pumpkins and cucumbers and zucchinis and squash, all that stuff, vined out into some of the gaps. And all of a sudden, it was barely hanging on. Like after that second heat dome event, it was hanging on by its fingernails. And it it held on just long enough to grab that first rain. I'll give part of it to planning and a lot of it to luck this time.
Okay. We actually didn't have a horrible year down here for rain. Like there's a section of us down here right on the Oklahoma state line. That's about maybe 40, 50 miles tall. It goes a little east of me and it goes west of me, but I go about another 20, 30 miles north and people start getting kind of dry. And you go east and people start getting kind of dry. What how has your cover cropping system evolved in the last 10 years? What have been some of your major lessons and maybe what's a go-to mix for you?
For us, our biggest lesson was trying to navigate our crop rotation and mold it to fit around the cover crops. And around here, you see a lot of 2, 3. Like I know one guy down the road, he does 4 years in a row wheat. It drives me batty watching it, but we can't do that if you're with because that multi-species blend is so sensitive to so many different herbicides that we cannot put any sort of residual herbicide on our wheat, not even fall applied stuff. So that was a huge learning lesson one year. We nuked almost 300 acres of cover crop. Not realize we were thinking, okay, well, we put it on in the fall. That should be okay. No, that was not okay. And then we had some really hard lessons with that. Now it's 1 year wheat, and we use wheat just so we can get to cover crop. And if we do any sort of herbicides, just like 2,4-D and dicamba, nothing residual, just anything to kind of smoke what's out there in the early spring. And so now we've evolved into a set rotation now. It's 1 year wheat, goes to cover crop when you would typically see wheat stubble summer fallowed. And then we graze the cover crop, and then I'll go to milo or corn. And then if it's corn, we usually follow that with another cover crop like the triticale and rapeseed this year. And then that goes to beans, which this then comes back to wheat. It's a 3-year fast rotation. That way we're not hanging out in one specific crop more than we have to. And it basically allows us to graze 2 out of every 3 of our crop acres.
Okay. So it looks like you come off wheat, which is cool season grass.
Mm-hmm.
And you said it was a bridge crop. Or
Mm-hmm.
Those weren't your words, those were my words. I thought when you said we use wheat to get to different covers, I thought, okay, wheat's a bridge crop. I want to know, can you explain that?
Oh, the best fit we've found for our multi-species cover crop blends, and we like this one a lot, is just right after we plant our wheat in our bean stubble, take it to harvest, and as soon as it's harvested, like maybe a week or two, depending on the weather, I've sometimes pushed it out to the end of July, but we are usually in there pretty fast with that cover crop. And then the wheat allows us to go to that warm season cover crop mix and then get some good summer growth out of that, get some good heat units on it, maybe catch a few late rains and get some good growth. That way we have a whole lot of grazing.
I mean, that makes sense.
I hate spraying wheat stubble. Like it is just, it's just, here's $50 an acre. Go spray something that's not growing anything. And then you do it twice, and then you're just at that point you're just angry.
It blows my mind the acres of wheat that got sprayed this year, and it was the same everywhere. The fields are full of pigweeds, kochia, and crabgrass. Like everywhere I drove, May and June, that's what I saw. And it's really funny because I've got a friend down in Oklahoma. I run some cattle for him, and he had a couple neighbors that couldn't get their wheat sprayed in time. So he's like, okay, I'll buy it. Insurance adjusted it to like 20. So we got 20 bushel wheat, we got pigweeds, we got kochia, we got crabgrass. He sent the chopper man out there to chop it, put it in the bunk. For about $50 a ton, he got like 7,000 tons of great feed for about 13.5% protein.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And I think about how many people went out and sprayed their wheat fields and all the dead pigweeds and kochia in wheat fields just so they could, windrow it and bale it. I don't know.
Yeah. It was there was a lot of people that terminated wheat. There was a lot of people that let their wheat ride and then sprayed it before harvesting it, and that ended up being like nothing helped this year. If you sprayed it early and then tried to plant something through it, the chinch bugs were in it, and they took pretty much everything in that next crop. Then if you let it ride and you sprayed it before you went through it with the combine, by the time you were and of course, Mother Nature had to rain. Like we sprayed it, people would spray it, and then all of a sudden it rained and it all regrew again. So they were left at 20, 30, whatever it was an acre to spray it all, and then it all grew back, and they had to slice through it anyways with the combine. Nothing's more fun than running all that garbage through a combine, trying not to destroy a machine cutting 10, 15 bushel wheat.
I've sat in a machine and tried to cut 20 bushel wheat through pigweeds, and it's not very much fun.
No. Honestly, it requires more skill than cutting 60 bushel wheat, because you're just sitting there just white knuckled listening to all the different sounds under your feet and behind you, praying to the good Lord you don't slug something or rip something apart, and you're crawling along at 2 or 3 mile an hour. It's about the most stressful. That was about the most stressful harvest I've ever had.
Yeah, my friends haven't let me run a combine in probably close to a decade, and that's just fine with me. I'm a better grain cart driver, a better truck driver than I am a combine operator.
I love running the combine. I don't know, for some reason in a normal year it's almost therapeutic for me. Like I can the vibrations of the rotor, like I can hear it in my head. I can, that hum. I just, for some reason, I almost just kind of relax and just enjoy myself when I'm in there. In the grain cart, I'm just getting yelled at all the time. I'm never in the right spot.
That's the curse of the grain cart driver. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to run road gear. I mean, if you want me there, I'll get her there. Things got a seatbelt for a reason.
Exactly. But then you're going too fast. Slow down. You're going to break something. But why aren't you here right now?
Yeah, don't spill that. Even though I'm driving like a crazy person, don't spill that. Make sure you load that truck right, even though we parked it on the road, which is 3 feet higher than the field. Good luck seeing in it.
Yep. Don't overload me. But why did you send me to town 300 pounds light? It's
Yeah, fill it up, but don't overload it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just send that one at 107,000. No big deal.
Yeah, that's they call it IFTA. If the DOT don't see it, it's not a problem.
I mean, when you're like 4 miles from the elevator down dirt roads, load the wagon. Just don't worry about the mule. If you got to go down 5 miles of interstate or, a good highway, maybe kind of lighten that sucker up a little bit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's around here. We call it farmer filled. That's usually if it's loaded front to back, it's farmer filled.
All right. So I was going to ask you about transition from conventional, but it sounds like you just kind of came on board and was like, Dad, I read some books. This is what we're doing.
Yeah, and dad just, he never was one of those that just liked working ground. Like he went minimal till really early on where everybody was still doing recreational tilling. It's like, oh, hey, I'm bored Saturday night. Let's go disc. And it's, oh, there's 3 pigweeds out there. Now let's go disc. Dad was like, no, no, let's do like once, maybe twice, depending on what happened. Dad never really was big into ripping up ground. Like he hated messing with the plow. Just he hung a lot of that stuff up early and was very minimal till like all of his fall crops. He went no till as soon as they had a planter that could do it. And the only thing he ended up tilling was wheat. And once we figured out how to not have to till for growing wheat, he was on board. It's like that's just a lot of time wasted that I don't have to spend in a cab anymore.
Fair enough. So you guys have kind of always been moving that direction.
Yep. Just it slowly but surely. Dad's never one that likes to try something first. He likes to see other people he likes to let other people make the mistakes. And then he'll slowly kind of start the adoption. So once he sees it with his own eyes, see how it works, then he's like, okay, now we can start thinking of how to make it work for us.
You seem like a little more of an early adopter.
I am. I like to be on the forefront of a lot of different things. I I like to push the envelope. I like to just there's there's no reason to be left behind, and things are changing so fast nowadays that if you're not changing with them, you're gonna get left behind.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So one of the things that I do to try to keep myself from getting, left behind is I try to go to conferences and get seminars and, poke my network and just make sure that I know that there's nothing new that I need to learn. And if there is something new I need to learn, I go learn it.
Mhm.
What are some of the resources you've used over the years for education and ideas?
Um, I'm kind of a nerd. I like reading a lot of like just honestly, the No Till Farmer magazine is a great place for me to start. And then after that, I usually fall down a rabbit hole. I'll read different. I've got mounds of paper and stuff saved on the tablets and stuff of different college papers discussing different trials trying this and different trials trying that. Just what different plants can do. And then I like to go to a lot of things that Green Cover puts on. They've been like they're pretty much just kind of the OGs of the cover crop world, and they're pushing so far so fast all the time, trying new different things. And heck, that's why I've got watermelons out in this dang cover crop. Is one year they had watermelons. I'm like, heck yeah, throw some of those in, we'll try it. What not? What could go wrong? And um so a lot and I've gone to a couple different conferences. I tend to be a bit of a workaholic to the point where I sometimes don't like to leave. I'd rather maybe watch it on my phone while I'm working, or watch it later, or something like that. But I've been trying to be better about going to things instead of just kind of sitting in my couch or the tractor cab watching it.
I get that disease too. Like I just don't want to leave. Like why would I want to go to Denver for 3 days? That's Denver. Like
It
why can't you people have more conferences somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, not in the middle of town? But I guess if it was in the middle of town or out in the middle of nowhere, they wouldn't get all the big money people to show up.
True that. Yeah, that's last time I was in Denver. I was like, this is not fun. I don't know why I'm here. Can I leave now? It's no offense to those people who live in Denver, by the way. It just I don't like your town.
I was just in Santa Fe for like 5, 6 days. Now, don't get me wrong, Santa Fe's a nice town. I don't think I could see myself living there. I mean, there's some beautiful houses, some beautiful scenery. Um, and then we like on the way home yesterday or a couple days ago, we swung up through Taos. That's a weird place. Like if you go to Taos, make sure you got enough fuel to leave because you might. I'm not saying it's a bad place. It's just they're a little strange out there. And I guess maybe that leads me to, well, we'll go somewhere else. In the last 10, 12 years, have you guys noticed any of your neighbors changing the way they farm?
Yeah. I've had quite a few people that have they were what at first they watched skeptically. At first they mocked, then it was skepticism, then it was, man, they keep doing this and it seems like it's working for them, to maybe I ought to give this a try with something. And then they finally kind of turned into, every now and then I get a random text message from a neighbor and it's like, hey, I'm kind of thinking of trying some cover crops. What should I kind of, can you give me a basic idea what I'm looking at doing? And I've got a neighbor that's a grain farmer, just no cows, nothing. And he's really bullish on getting into cover crop, but he doesn't know, he's having a hard time making it pencil out for him, which I'm like, yeah, the cattle is what makes it pencil out for us. So last year we worked out a little deal. I did some graze rental and I mob grazed it. I just put the whole dang herd out. I told him we put the whole herd out there. We will take it. We will take her down to about a third left of what's out there, and I'll get them off, and they won't come back. And that helped him. He said after that, says between that and then the benefit that he got to his corn crop this year, he's like, I'm looking to get a lot more into this now.
Okay, you've brought up a couple things. You said, okay, cattle are what make the whole cover crops thing pencil. And earlier, you also made a comment about overgrazed some cover crops. I might not have captured that correctly, but I think you said you might have left them in there a little bit too long.
Yeah, the first time we took it almost to the dirt.
I might challenge that if you're like in a cover crop type system where you're going to be replanting, that those plants are going to be less sensitive and that soil, maybe I shouldn't say that, but the plants are going to be less sensitive to overgrazing. In my mind, we don't want to overgraze our native range because that's going to reduce the overall plant health and shrink the root mass and hurt recovery time. But if we're talking about overgrazing a plant that's just there to do a function and it's not going to regrow, we're not going to have that plant there. We're not going to be counting on that plant next year. It's more difficult for me to see that overgrazing is a problem. When I see like a field of planted annuals that there's still half of it there, I think of that as more, they not necessarily as waste, but why didn't they graze this a little bit harder and take it down a little bit harder? So I'm interested to hear what you have to say about overgrazing cover crops and planted annuals.
Oh yeah, I've the conventional thought is you've paid for it all, go get it all. And but around here, I always like to say residue is king. And if I take it all off and if I strip all of that off and I eat, just they graze it down to the dirt, it makes it so it doesn't really want to grow back as quite as fast. And I've taken a lot of my residue away with it. So now I've got exposed soil, I've got more stuff that's susceptible to blowing, and I'm not keeping that ground covered as well as I'd like. And I'm not leaving some residue to maybe catch some snow and stuff like that. Some people like to do, they call it take half, leave half. Um, and there's some different research on that. I think Dale Strickler did a whole big thing about that. Um, I like to subscribe to the take 2/3, leave a third, because they found when you took half, that other half bounced back a little faster than if you were to take 2/3 in. But I still lean more towards what you were talking about, where I want to get some more out of it. There's more there that can be grazed, but I still do want to leave a little bit of that, cover that soil up, leave a little residue there, kind of trap in that moisture, act as that nice layer of mulch for me. And since we've done that, that's really, really helped keep just with with soil health and crop yields. I mean, just everything all across the board.
You've said something I think is kind of important or kind of understated about the ability of the residue to catch snow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those little snowstorms, those little snow blows, those little ice storms that we get throughout the winter. You know, you're a little farther north. I think you get a few more of them than I do. I think that those little moisture events in the winter are really, really underappreciated, especially by a lot of farmers, because there's no residue in most people's fields, and that snow ends up in the ditch or ends up in the neighbor's pasture and the neighbor's CRP, and they're missing out on moisture. I mean, a half inch of snow in to me is great moisture because that also helps. You know, the snow helps put some more nitrogen back in the soil. It's like a time release rain. It helps it gives it so much more time to infiltrate. And I think people kind of miss that. I can't tell you how many times over the last 10 years, driving back and forth to town, I'll see a wheat field, a, that's basically fallow or got, 2-inch tall wheat on it. There'll be nothing out in the field, be blowing dirt, and there'll be dirty snow in the ditch. 2 miles later, you get to somebody's pasture or CRP that's got, 2 or 3 foot tall grass. The ditch is empty. It's like, huh, what's going on here?
Must be some magic. Now there's a lot of things, and that also goes back to some of the things that I put in our cover crop blend. There's some things that I don't want the cows to really want to eat. I don't want to put a lot of them in there because, like I said, grazing is where we get a lot of a return on this. But there are a few things that I want to keep in there that the cows don't really want to eat a lot. Like sun hemp is a absolutely fabulous warm season legume. Grown in India, we actually can't even reproduce it here in the States just because it's such a long season plant. But it loves the heat. You give it just a dab of moisture, that stuff takes off. It's the stuff we've got out there is almost 6 feet tall. And in a good year, the tallest we had our tallest plant was 14 foot tall. And yeah, it was insane. And they make these gorgeous flowers and stuff on them. And they leave a lot of nitrogen behind. But the stems are completely unpalatable. The cows don't bother them. And they may break some of them over a little bit. They may take that top half and knock it over, whatever, but that stem is still there. There's a lot of those little stems scattered all over the field. The African cabbage, they will take the leaves off. Again, the stem is pretty well unpalatable once it's froze. So you have that as well. And then there's also some of the Sudan and Milo. Sometimes they'll take the stalk, sometimes they just take the leaf. It's kind of a hit or miss depending on its growth on it. And then the sunflowers, they pop the heads off. They'll eat the seeds and stuff like that. But again, the stalk, unpalatable. They leave it be. So we have a lot of different things that we leave behind that we're hoping to try to catch as much snow as we can with.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Do you have any numbers about the fertility value of grazing the cattle on cover crops as far as what they return back to the soil in NPK?
I don't have any good numbers on that one. I need to. The couple years I did it, they were such varying numbers that nothing made sense, and I couldn't quite figure it out what was going on.
I think, to be fair, I think this is something that almost nobody has an idea on. I think there's some numbers that are kind of maybe are going to get us in the ballpark. And the reason I'm saying that is like, it's really difficult in a pasture type setting to analyze the manure and the urine kind of separately and see what effects that they're going to have going into the soil. Most of the studies that I found were from confinement type operations on a ration. And they were breaking down, roughly what the NPK value was in the manure and in the urine return to the soil. My argument is that's anaerobic decomposition, which is going to be different. The manure and the urine together in a liquid state is a different decomposition process than a manure pad on the soil over here and urine on the ground over here. So maybe it's just kind of an overall challenge, but it's undeniable the fertility benefits that the cattle bring back to the soil while grazing a cover crop that benefits the next cash crop. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Now that we've been running for so many years in this cycle, we are now rolling over a bunch of organic nitrogen year after year after year. We finally got stuff where it's in this cycle of breaking down. There's this constant state of keeping those soil microbes fed, keeping that ground really working. And we're now rolling over anywhere between, depending on the ground, it's anywhere between 30 and 50 pounds a year just in organic nitrogen. And that has helped us substantially we've reduced our nitrogen application quite a bit. With on our Milo, we've dropped it probably about 40 pounds. We're down into that'll do 70, 80. I'll maybe creep to 85, 90, but we were well over 100 for that. And then we haven't put on any we don't put on any K. We haven't had to really mess with any magnesium or potassium or anything like that. One of the nice things we've noticed is that our numbers actually went up once we started using the cover crops, because those big tap roots, they went way deep. Like they scavenged and pulled everything back up to the surface. So then it broke down and went back down into the surface area, and our numbers have started climbing back up again. And for our available FOSS going into the next year, that one is a lot harder of a target to nail down, because FOSS is a real tricky thing. It likes to tie up so easy. And with our pH issues, it's just a mess trying to get a good. It's almost like trying to throw a dart onto a dartboard in the middle of a tornado. It's a tough chore. But on average, I would say we have about another 10 pounds of FOSS available to the next year's crop. And when we first started out with cover crops, we were putting on some nitrogen just to help them get established and get going. We don't do that anymore. There's enough left there in the ground that we're rolling over that it just makes use of it. It takes off, and then it usually puts back what it takes between them and the cattle.
Are you backing that up with soil sampling?
Not yet. I've been trying to. I did my first real grid sampling and stuff last year. A lot of it, some was just, I'll wander out here and take a stab, and we'll see what we got here. And I'll wander out over here and take a stab, and it's not good enough data that I'd feel comfortable making a huge spreadsheet about it. It's more of this is kind of what I'm seeing. A general overview rather than specific numbers for specific fields.
I think there's a lot of value in those anecdotal observations rather than, eventually you got to back that up with hard science, with hard numbers.
Yep.
But when you hear dozens of people all saying the same thing, like, we're having these observations, this is what we're seeing work, and this is how we think it's working. When you have a dozen people all telling you the same thing, it'd be kind of hard to say, well, in order to prove that, you need to go spend another $50 an acre or grid soil sample it. Just so you know,
yeah.
Well, I can see what's happening with my own eyes. I can do my own measurements, and this is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I'm reducing my inputs. I tell people there's my proof right there. I've cut my inputs by at least a third, and I'm still getting the same. I don't so much shoot for the top end yield goal anymore. I think that's a fool's errand around here. But I shoot for profit, not for bragging rights at the next cafe. But my yields are still right in line with pretty much everybody else's.
And your input costs are lower. You probably work less hours and have a better quality of life.
Yeah. Get to spend some time with the family, and it's all in all, it's been a win. just straight across the board. It's been challenging. I won't lie there. It's not as simple as following the directions on the back of a jug. It has taken a lot of work and a lot of, ooh, that was a mistake, to go. There we go. I think we finally dialed ourselves in.
I think you said couple important things there. You can't buy soil health in a jug. They don't sell it at the farm store. And it's not prescriptive, and I think that's why it's got a fairly slow uptake rate.
Yeah, it's so varying for different, like what works for me right here in north central Kansas does not work at all another 20-30 miles up. That's, people are like, yeah, we tried that, we don't know what happened. Like 2/3 of the stuff just, like, the bugs got in it and they just ate it down to the ground. I'm like, bugs? Like, we have some bugs here, but and they start talking about some different mold issues, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't understand that. What's mold? You have to have moisture to have mold, and we don't have that. So every operation's use of cover crops has to be specifically tailored to their goals, their operation, and it requires a lot of work. And some people are willing to take on that task, and some people are like, that's just too much work, I don't really want to dive into that.
I think people are looking for a magic bullet or a magic solution or a prescriptive system that's written down in a binder that they can just pull out and say, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing today. And when you start doing cover crops, you might have to adjust your blend every year. You might have to adjust
Yep.
your blend based on when weather conditions allow you to get into the field. So you plant the right mix of, you put the right mix of plants out there to help bridge you to the next cash crop.
Mm-hmm. You
Or the
have to,
right mix that's going to grow in that environment to give you enough forage for cows.
yeah, you have to be able to, and also you have to worry about what's available to you as well. With supply chain issues that have been just absolutely brutal on the cover crop world as well, and drought issues. Some years you have things that just aren't available. So now you're going, okay, well, like 2 years ago, no beardless triticale at all. I couldn't even get rye. I was like, what the heck happened? They're like, yeah, we don't have hardly anything from our suppliers. So they're like, we do have some oats though. So now I start looking, okay, what kind of oats can I use that are going to get me over winter? Which those are options are very few. And I was like, oh, Cossack black oats will overwinter, and they've been shown to have better allelopathic properties, kind of like rye and triticale. Awesome. So after like 2 hours of reading, I'm like, okay, adjusted, full send. It's you got to be able to adapt and adjust. And I basically, with the exception of our hard fast crop rotation for the moment, which if something changes in the future and we have to change it, I'm fine with changing it. I'm willing to adapt. That's not a big deal. But right now, the only thing that's hard and fast for us is our crop rotation. That's what we're sticking to. No question. No matter what happens, that's what we're sticking to. That's our one constant. But everything else, let's adapt around that.
Okay. It, we've been calling it adaptive grazing or adaptive rotational management, adaptive multi-paddock grazing, holistic adaptive management. The moral of the story for me is your management practices should not be rigid and inflexible, because the
Correct.
world is not rigid and inflexible. Things change all the time. So we need to
Mm-hmm.
be adaptable to deal with the change as it comes. So being adaptable for the future. There's We've got a few problems in ag, don't we? I mean,
Couple, couple.
and for clarity, for those of you out there in podcast land, Tyler's got a great TikTok channel, JTAC Farms. It'll be linked in the description, show notes. Um, and he's been having some conversations about the future of ag, and I share a lot of your concerns. So, where would you like to start?
Well, let's go ahead and just start with the first one that I started with in that series. We'll just start with land and land prices.
Okay.
Right now, and I was talking to another kid. I can say kid now because I'm in my 30s and he's younger than me. But I was talking about I've been looking to try to expand my operation, and the price of ground here has just gotten silly. Now, if you compare the price of ground around here to something up in the I states,
It's still
they
cheap
just like
compared to the I states.
they're like that's cheap, and I'm like, well, not when I grow a third of what you guys normally grow in a year, but around here the prices for it just don't pencil out. I There was a quarter that uh they were asking 50, basically it's like 51.50 an acre. And I'm like, that's a spicy meatball. I start running the numbers on that and and I know the guy who farmed it, and I know the general yields that he's had over there. And I also know it's been worked for years and years and years. And so I know I'm starting essentially at zero where I want to with like cover crops and rolling over my stuff and everything else. And the numbers I came back with were like, I have to have awesome years for the next 30 years just for that ground to cash flow itself, not make a profit, just kind of, pay the taxes, pay everything else. And then I'll start making my first profit, at 65. I'm like, that sounds horrible. And now I get it. Nowadays, you're not so much buying ground for yourself as you are for the next generation. There's a guy that brought that up in the comments. I'm like, that is a fair point. But the problem is, I still have to pay for it. I'm not in a great position right now to be able to drag that anvil behind me. Because if it tanks a couple of years, that means I'm going to have to rob profit from someplace else on the farm, which if that tanked, I'm guessing something the whole rest of the farm isn't going to be doing is great either. So now I'm taking a bad year, robbing everything. I'm robbing Peter to pay Paul, and I'm both Peter and Paul in this scenario. And it's just not, it could be disastrous. I I don't know what the solution to that is. It bothers me because 5 years ago, 7 years ago, even I passed on some ground, and I kick myself for it every time I drive by that field. I could have had it for 2,700 an acre, 2,300 an acre, and at the time I was like, that's way too much. Now I'm just like, you idiot! You should have just bought all of that because it cash flowed, even with $9, even with $10, $9 beans, whatever they got down to. You know, it still cash flowed okay. It wasn't You weren't getting rich off of it, but it was doing all right. Now we're in a spot where the rest of your farm is now paying for that next field. That's not something I particularly like.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. And the comment you made that there's guys that are buying ground for the next generation, and I was kind of sitting here trying to roll over how that works. And I'm sure there's vehicles and legal mechanisms that so the current generation could spend money and pass that asset to the next generation without tax consequences. But I think about the tax consequences, and
Mm.
it it seems like every 6 months there's some kind of difference with the inheritance tax. It's like my dad tells me, I hear from him every once in a while because he's like 80. He's like, yeah, I should have died 4 years ago before they changed this rule, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, well, I'm glad you're here, grump ass. Like, stick around for a while because I still need you for advice. And B, you never know. Like, they could change it next year and it could be a whole lot better for somebody in our position. So it happens when it happens, and you just kind of have to deal with the situation. but I know that I'm going to have to come up with a pile of money to pay taxes. And he's
Yeah.
doing the best he can. So sometimes I kind of question, like, I might question that, like somebody saying, oh, I'm buying this for the next generation. Or maybe that's just, I don't know what I'm saying, but land price and availability, it's a huge problem. We're not just losing, um, it's not just the land price that's out of control. It's there's a lot of areas that have, urban rural interfaces. Guys are
Mhm.
selling off 40 acres right by town so they can grow houses there or grow ranchettes and have horse farms. It's more land being taken out of production, which puts upward price pressure way out here in the rural areas. $2,500 an acre just seems like an absurd amount of money in Kansas to pay for any piece of dirt to me. I mean, irrigation doesn't have a lot of value to me, like center pivot irrigation. Okay, yeah, if it works, that's great, but that's still also repair bills down the line. It's also upkeep and overhead cost.
Mm-hmm.
There's, I got to tell you this. I think I've said this on the show before. So I'm going to get this wrong of when it was, but it's been within the last year. There's a property that traded. It was like 1,100 acres, and it's covered with cedar trees. Has not had fire in there since probably the 60s.
Oh no.
Does not really have fence around it. Hasn't had cattle in it in at least 10 years, but it's got a couple food plots and it's got a couple of deer blinds on
If I rolled my eyes any harder, they'd pop out of my head. I
it.
that's don't get me wrong, I love hunting deer as much as the next, country guy, but
But when those
oh my
deer hunters come in and pay almost $3,000 an acre for quote grass like that, that's not screwing over the farmer next door. That's screwing me over raising my property taxes.
mm-hmm.
And it's not like, I don't know. I don't know if the Cloud County government's as greedy as Barber County government, but it seems like my property taxes have gone up about 40% in 5 years.
Ours likes to play games. They're like, "Oh, we lowered your mill levy," and then they raised all the evaluations. I'm like, "Oh, that's cute. That's you guys, like distract over here while they, go over here." And it. I'm like, you guys are still taking more. Don't just own it. Just say, "Hey, we need more money. We're taking all your money," and just 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 quit trying to be coy about it. Just own it.
Yep. Yep. And, the land price thing isn't getting better. And the direction I see us going, and it's scary as hell, is becoming more of a nation of tenant farmers and ranchers. Like
Mm-hmm.
somehow we were all distracted over the last 20 years, and most people in ag got turned into tenants, and we're all asleep. Nobody saw it. Now here we are in 2023, and people are starting to realize that, and it's like, oh crap, what's the next generation of food producers look like? Where are they going to come from?
We had a farmer in our area that he rented a whole bunch of he rented almost, I think he was at 90% of his operation was rented ground, and out of that 90%, almost all of it was by one family. And the people that he rented it from for years and years and years, they got along together, they drank beer together, they hunted together. The next generation did not like him at all. So when the old generation passed, they took that ground and they yanked it lock, stock, and barrel. Overnight, he was essentially bankrupt because he had all of these expensive tractors and combines that were on lease that now he had 10% of the ground he did have. And all of a sudden, he was scrambling, trying to get. Yeah, he had some cash to save up, some reserves saved up, but it took him hard. And then a bunch of that ground sold. He was able to buy some of it back, but now you know, he's almost a senior citizen now with land notes that it'd take him well over 100 years old before they're paid off. Trying to, he's still making it work, but he's like, that was not what I had in mind. He's like, I thought we were good. And that's the scariest thing about me for renting. Like I don't mind renting the occasional piece, but man, when you're having to do everything for someone else and you're not able to make your own decisions, really, you got to make it. You got to go ask, especially if you're doing shares. Like, I don't want to share with anyone. It's, I'll pay you cash for it, and you let me do my thing, and maybe we can have a few other stipulations on it. But just I hand you presidential flashcards, and you let me farm the way I want to, and because you're not going to get some guy who's living in Indianapolis and working in a corner office to to be like, hey, I want to plant this cover crop over here. Can you pay your landowner share of that? He's going to look at you and go, what good am I getting out of that?
What's a
Well,
cover
I'm helping the
crop?
soil health. Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm helping the soil health. That's what fertilizer's for. Like, I've heard these conversations before, and they're just I am that's one thing I'm absolutely terrified about. And I'm also seeing a weird trend just kind of started around here. A patch of ground that got bought by an investment group that was held for about a year and a half, and now they're flipping it for a little more to another investment group that had sold their patch to a different investment group that they flipped. It's giving me subprime like warnings and stuff. I don't know. I don't see a crash ever really happening like they did with the subprime stuff, but it's almost like they're building it up like they were doing then, inflating, how good this investment is. And you're like, well, this investment's amazing. They're not making any more of it. And then they flip it to the next person and, new paint, new shrubs, flip it to the next person and just inflate the price of everything.
Kind of like the deer hunters have been doing with some of these little hunting properties around me for the last few years. Is they'll come in and buy it, move the feeders around, and leave their cameras up.
Mm-hmm.
No kidding. There's a guy. He's probably got less than 2,500 acres between lease and what he owns, kind of scattered around the county. His corn bill at the co-op for feeding deer
Oh no.
was six figures.
Um, I'm sorry. I think I might be having a stroke. Do you smell toast? I think I smell toast. That's that's insane.
It Yes, yes. It's insane. It's totally insane. And we're told by our, some of our local officials, oh, the hunting's good for our community. It's good for tourism. It's good for our community. And they'll point out, well, this guy spent over $100,000 at the co-op on corn to feed deer. Like, hold up. Okay. That's all right for the co-op. That's okay for the corn farmers. Pretty much everybody else that's outside of town, it's not great for, because it's driving up our land prices. We're getting a lot of people out here. Like, I don't have a problem with tourists. I don't have a problem with deer hunters. Pick up your damn deer corn bags out of the ditch. Please take those things with you. I don't want to see them. I get tired of them. There's one guy around here that, like, a little pickup bed trailer. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
He's got one of those that he pulls behind a little SUV. That's when he goes to town and gets corn in. And you can always tell when he's around, because there'll be a trail of corn back and forth from the co-op to wherever he went to dump it out in the field.
Yep.
And this is a guy that doesn't even put it in a feeder, right? He just drives out there and shovels a bunch of it out the back onto the ground and drives off.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys that they'll show up in their pickup and they'll be like, "Hey man, if I, did you fill up my truck bed?" I'm like, "Do you see how high up that auger is? Like, I don't even know if I can hit your truck bed. Like, do you see how big that auger is too?" I said, "Looking at those bald tires you got back there, I'll probably blow out and break your axle doing it." And he's, "Oh no, it'll be fine." I'm like, Now try the next one down the road. I'd I did that once and idled it, missed half of it, got a bunch on the ground. He's like, "Well, I ain't paying for that stuff on the ground. That's you missed." I'm like, "Okay, cool. I guess the cows will eat it." But I don't understand that. I don't understand where they're coming from on the tourism side. I'm like, you're for deer season, you've got like you've got your guys, and they're not out going to local museums, taking in, you know, shows at the local theater or whatever like that. They're not doing. They're staying in their cabin. They may go get some food, but maybe go get some beer. But I've always pushed back on that. Oh, it's tourism. Like, no, it's not really tourism. I mean, they're there for like a weekend and they're gone. They're usually just in their cabin and then they go out and spend all day in the sand.
And the point that I would make is okay, yeah. Does that guy coming in for 3 or 4 weekends a year, does he bring in more money to the community than a rancher running that ground and running livestock on that ground, properly managing it and having a sellable product in the community? Like, you gonna tell me that's less of an economic benefit? That rancher creating a job for himself, maybe a part-timer, or demand for some more day thug help while he's producing a protein product that can be processed and sold locally? Like, you gonna tell me that Florida deer hunter is a better tenant of that land?
Yeah, I've had that argument quite a few times, and they usually do some sort of straw man argument. Well, I mean, look at Joe Bob over there. He doesn't manage his stuff very well, and they find the worst example that they can possibly find, which there are a number of them, and they're like, well, they don't manage their ground well. Why why are you he's not managing it any worse than they are. I'm like, just because two people are bad at something doesn't mean that the other one's the model that we should follow here. They're both bad at it. Let's look at someone who's actually, like you were saying, properly caretaking it, and then let's run some numbers.
But then again, somebody's going to walk up and challenge you on your definition of properly managed, and then that leads to a whole other set of conversations and agreements.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll slide on down the road of future problems in agriculture. I don't think that there's an answer for land price, and I think things are going to get worse price wise before they get better. And I think carbon is going to have a lot to do with that. Soil carbon storage, carbon sequestration by no-till cover crops. Like, it's coming. Like, it's 100% coming. And as that market starts to develop, I think land price could get really weird when the carbon market starts to exert price pressure on the land market.
Yep. It actually reminds me, I need to get mine. I went with FBN's thing that they pay for cover crops and putting wheat in your rotation and stuff like that. I looked at a couple other ones, and my gosh, there was one, I think it was indigo, I looked at the amount of paperwork that I was going to need to dig up for like the last 10 years. And I'm just like, and I I was like, you're going to be paying me about 35 cents an hour to work and get all this stuff dug up. I'll pass. Thanks. But yeah, that program's continuing to evolve. There's going to be a few more things. Like right now, no one's getting rich from it, but it doesn't hurt to have a few extra. It never hurts to have a few extra dollars laying around.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get another $15 or $20 an acre of cash flow, that makes a big difference to a lot of folks.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's for the cover crop stuff for ours, we're running about $10 an acre for that. I'm like, well, heck, basically I'll just apply that to my seed bill, and now instead of paying $30 an acre in seed, now I just paid $20 an acre. All of a sudden that number just that where the amount of cows and days on that cover crop that I have to to start getting into the black, that number got a lot smaller now. That's a lot faster to start turning a profit.
For sure. Okay, labor shortages.
Oh, that's one that's man, like the equipment one, that one got a lot of traffic, but the one that got some serious hate on there was the labor shortages one. I'm going to sound like a boomer for a second, okay? So just kind of bear with me. No one apparently wants to work around here anymore. I don't get it. I don't understand where everybody went. Like overnight, everybody, like all the help wanted signs just became like people basically just riveted it to their front door. It's just that permanent of a problem. I don't know what happened. I don't know where everyone went. For just that in that instant, but I know we have a serious brain drain out here. And that goes back to the comment I made earlier about when I was in school, we were basically told there is no future in small town America. I was literally told exactly that to my face.
Okay, so you made a comment earlier that you were in your 30s. I'm going to guess you're probably early 30s.
Mid 35.
Okay, so I'm only 10 years older than you. But yeah, like around the time that we were both going to school, like I was kind of at the beginning of it, and I'm not sure what they're still telling anybody now, but I remember being told you got to go to college. Everybody's got to have a degree. If you don't have a college degree, you'll never be able to get a good job. You'll never be able to have a good quality of life. Everybody's got to have a college degree. And like right when I was getting ready to join the Navy, they opened up college admissions for more people. And then while I was in, it's like, oh, well, let's pay for everybody to go to college because everybody should have the opportunity to go to college and money shouldn't be an issue. So we paid for everybody to go to college. First, we told everybody you got to go to college, you got to get a degree, or you'll never know anything. You'll never get a good job. And then we said, okay, now we'll pay for it. Now we have generations that have been told to look down on manual labor jobs, to look down on physical jobs, and told they had to go get a college degree, backed up with public debt. And now we have a generation of people with useless degrees without practical, real world physical skills and no knowledge of how the world works, no knowledge of where food comes from, no skills other than a liberal arts degree or something in gender studies. Like, I'm not throwing shade on your bassoon performance degree. Trust me, I'm not.
No, don't worry, I'll throw it myself.
I remember one of the actual good things I remember from middle school is our middle school vocal music instructor. Forget her name, short chick. She said, like, she kind of came down real hard one day on the quote, the jocks in the class. And she said, you guys are making fun of music. You're making fun of playing instruments. Let me tell you what, your chances of getting a college scholarship are 100 times greater if you play an instrument than if you play sports. So if you want to go to college and have somebody else pay for it, you need to learn how to play an instrument.
Yep, 100%. I went with almost a full ride. I had, I can't even remember now how many different scholarships that I got. And I basically went almost a full ride with all of my different music scholarships. And also I went after every scholarship that wasn't, nailed down at the time, because that was something I started noticing when I was a kid. That's even worse now, that nobody was actually, there's not a lot of people, there's not a lot of competition for some of these scholarships. Like I was going up against like one or two people, and I'm like, okay, I'll try my odds on that. Well, now, like, my parents have a scholarship fund, and maybe they get 1, 2 a year, and it's opened up for like multiple counties around us. Like, I was like, oh, it's only $500. I'll just take out some debt. It's fine. I don't need to go to that much work to get that scholarship for $500. But
well, if my daughter knew there was a scholarship around, it didn't matter if it was $50. She was writing for it. She was trying to get it. She's a smart girl.
Yep. And I remember the people talking about tech school. Like, I could not imagine saying this to a diesel mechanic at one of these bigger truck stops, like some of these guys like down in Salina, they're pulling some serious money working there. I mean, they work some hideous hours and it's not easy work, but they make some dang good money. And telling them that if you go to tech schools just for losers who can't hack it at a 4-year program, like no, those guys are making bank. Like there's a reason why he's driving a 2023 Denali and has a Snap-on toolbox that's worth more than your all of your college debt combined, and
More than your rental house.
Right? Yeah. He's got a boat. He's going to the lake every weekend, and is drinking his weight in beer and paying for it all in cash. Those guys like now. I give a little bit of credit to this, like to the micro dirty jobs kind of movement, really highlighting that these trades are important. Your underwater basket weaving degree is not going to fix your plumbing. It's not going to keep the lights on. These are the people that make the country function while you sit in your ivory tower and philosophize.
Just in my anecdotal observation, like county road department, going, to a quarry to pick up material, going to the feed mill, manual labor jobs, a lot of guys 55 to 65 years old, and a few guys under 30. There's nobody in the middle.
Nope.
And that's our generation, bud. That's our generation that was told, go to college, get a degree, get big or get out, go to town, get a job, because there's no future in agriculture.
Yep. And there's a lot of us are gone. There's I gave my ratio around here to millennial Gen X-ish was to boomer ratio is like 1 in 10. Like there's not a lot of us around. Like when I'm looking at the next generation of farmers around in my area, there's like 5 of us. Where right now there's like 12, 14, 15 families. There's not hardly anyone to take over the mantle once those are gone. I mean, I'm seeing there's a lot of old guys running spraying rigs now, and a lot of the co-op Nutrien, I don't care who it is, they're screaming bloody murder trying to find anybody. They're like, we will train you, we will pay for you to get your CDL, we will pay for you to get your commercial applicator's license, we will pay everything while still paying you pretty decent money. And people are like, I don't know, I got to be outside. I have allergies. Well, I've got dust allergies too. There, Susan, buck up. It's not that big of a deal. Take some Zyrtec, you'll be fine.
Take some Zyrtec, put a couple blue paper towels in your pocket, go on with your life, because that's what the rest of us have to do.
Yeah, exactly. Keep some Mucinex for when you start getting, hung up with a bunch of dust in your chest, and it'll be fine. I promise.
Are there days where your allergies get so bad you just quit and go home?
I've had a couple get pretty, if I'm mowing and I'm getting through like some ditchweed and stuff like that, that will lay me out. And I mean, it'll send me into a migraine spiral where the whole house is black and I'm like just laying under 5 different layers of blankets trying not to cry. That's about the only thing that'll really put me on my butt. The Milo dust is the only thing that other than that really gets to me after a while. At the end of Milo harvest, I need a break because I'm having a hard time. I'm wheezing, I'm hacking, and snot rockets are flying everywhere.
I get days where my eyes just water so much, my nose runs so much that there's almost nothing I can do but just camp on the couch with a bucket of Kleenexes.
Mm-hmm. It's twice a year I get a horrible sinus infection. Or not, well, they call it a sinus infection. I just call it my sinuses shifting. That's when it goes from warm to cool and cool to warm again. And if I don't get on it fast, I'm out for a week. It's like man flu on steroids.
My wife knows all about the man flu.
I had RSV last year, and I'm like, and Ash is like, She's like, is this what the man flu is? I'm like, no, this is what dying feels like. I'm sure of it. That's
Sure, man flu is way milder than this. I'm actually literally dying right now.
and I'm a grumpy sick person. My wife is, I don't know how she puts up with me. When I get sick, I don't like being inside. I don't like not doing something. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm a bit of a workaholic. And so all I'm doing while sitting inside is thinking of all the work I could be doing, and I just get grumpier.
Okay, fair enough. So, what else do we need to talk about with labor issues, labor shortages?
It's, I don't know. I'm starting to see some. I'm starting to see some positive resolution on that with kids. Like I've noticed in our school that the kids are now not just going and talking to a couple of lawyers downtown about how they got their law degree. Um, it's now they're looking in. I see them going to like like the plumbers, electricians, and stuff like that, talking to the tradespeople about different things. They're actually going to the tech college. The tech college is working with the high school, saying, "Hey, would you like to take some early college classes through us?" So they're working together, trying to keep some people more local. Like, hey, there is work here. There is a future here for you. We need people to help make our areas work. So I'm seeing some positive with that, but at the moment, stuff's really hurting. I tried to find some part-time help for planting crops a couple years ago, and what was it, a year ago? I can't remember. 2 years ago, I think, and I was way behind. And I put the ad out. I was paying $25 an acre, more if you had experience, or not acre, $25 an hour. And I'm like, that's good money to hopefully get someone. I had 3 people, and first one ghosted me when and I don't know why. I was like, okay, well, if you found something better, cool. Second guy wanted $500 just to talk to him. I'm like, I didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday, but I know a scam when I hear it. Have a nice day. The third guy just wanted gas money to come out and talk to me. I'm like, fabulous. I will fill up your tank, no questions asked. That's
I won't
call
give
me
you
out.
cash, but I'll put my nozzle in your tank and make sure you got enough to get back to town.
Exactly. And he came out, and he was an older guy, which I don't really care. And I said, what's your experience with Grainstar and auto steer? He's like, I don't use any of that. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, well, I said, we use that because on our air seeder, we have section control, and we use that just to help with, so we're not over sowing and wasting a bunch of seed and fertilizer. He goes, you use an air seeder? I'm like, yeah, that was in the listing that I needed help running the air seeder. And he's like, "No, you don't have a box drill?" I'm like, "No, I don't have a box drill." Well, if you want my help, you'll get a box drill. I'm like, running through my head, I'm thinking, yeah, I'm gonna go out and buy a $70,000 piece of equipment or a $50,000 piece of equipment and go hand it off to this guy just so I can have him plant some crops for me. Well, I've got a perfectly good one that I can't use now.
Yeah, that
And
doesn't
I
sound
was
like
like,
a good operation.
no. And I'm like, I no, we run our air seeder. We plant everything with our air seeder, with the exception of corn. And he's like, I don't use that crap. I'm like, well, I think we're at a bit of an impasse. And then he had a lot of blue words, and he actually left before I could fill up his tank. I'm like, bye. Guess I'll sleep next week then, I guess.
Yeah. Thanks for not reading my ad and wasting my time by driving out here. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I'm like, there's an hour of my life I'm never gonna get back. And I could have got 23 acres of stuff planted, in that hour that I wasted.
Yeah. I was sitting here thinking, you know, the land and labor issues that we've been talking about. And I feel like the solution is the downscale. You know, we agree that a new farmer coming out of college, unless you got a $500,000 sitting in the bank for capital, you're not starting a farm. You're not starting a commodity farm.
Nope.
On the other hand, I still think it's very possible and financially feasible, or economically feasible, not financially. I think it's economically feasible for somebody to buy land with debt, a small acreage, and with labor, make that acreage pay. I mean, vegetables, vegetables wait. Vegetables are a lot more profitable per square foot than wheat is, than corn or cover crops. And honestly, I don't think the world needs more corn, wheat, soybean, and cotton farmers. I
I
really
think
don't.
we're doing pretty good. We're doing pretty good on that right now.
We could use more people growing peppers. We could use more people growing potatoes. We could use more people growing shit that people actually eat that doesn't need to be processed.
Yeah.
That's what we need. And that's what I think that the future of agriculture looks like, is the big commodity farms being less owned by persons, more owned by corporations and investment firms. Still worked by persons, pretty, kind of in the same sharecropper system that we have now, or cash rent system we have now. But I think the days of large scale commodity operations being started up on personal capital, I think those days are gone.
Oh yeah, long gone. That's I started running numbers on what it would cost to start a basic operation, and I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, well, we'll start with like a 9500 or an 8820 combine. We're not. I wasn't even going crazy on equipment. I was like, okay, maybe a early 2000s Kraus sunflower drill, something like that, something that you could do some stuff with still, get some life out of it. And I start running numbers. I'm like, good Lord. Like, even especially with the used market today, that gets into that third video about equipment and stuff. The used market today is insane, even for garbage. They're wanting a mint for that because, well, there's people can't afford the new stuff, so they're like, okay, well, let's look and see what we got here in the used side of things, and the used market's just getting slammed right now. Not to mention all the supply chain issues with the new stuff too. I mean, right now a new air seeder is 18 months. I got to know almost 2 years away if I want a new air seeder.
And when do you have to put money down to start to get that?
The deposit, I don't quote me, but I believe the deposit has to go down when you order it. Yeah, I think it's like 5%, 10%, something like that.
Yeah, 5-10%. I'm gonna put 5% down on this piece of machinery that I know I'm not gonna see for 18 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And
tall.
that's the planners. I think the last I heard, the planners were around 12 to 14 months, so that's not quite as bad. But yeah, and then the air seeder side, the guy's like, if we even get the allocation. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? He goes, that's if Deere will let us have one. We got an allocation. They got an allocate. One of our dealers here got an allocation for one 50-foot air seeder. That's all they got. They're like, that's all you're getting from us this year. You get one 50-foot air seeder. They had it sold in like 35 seconds. It's because there was like 10 guys like, hey, I need a new air seeder. Well, the first one that walked in the door was like, congratulations, you're getting an air seeder. Everybody else, here's
Better
the
luck.
number of some rebuild it.
Better luck in the lottery next year.
Yeah, that's not something that's sustainable for the future. You cannot sustain an industry like that. I mean, it's getting like that for almost every place. Our local electric co-op, they order a boom truck, 36 months on the boom truck, and they said we're not guaranteeing the price on it. They paid full market price for that boom truck, and they still are probably going to have to pay the difference when they get it of what the market adjustment will be 3 years from now.
Wow.
That hurts your brain, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. Hey, you want to take a little relief break? I noticed you've been sipping some coffee. I need to go recycle some. We'll be back in a minute. Yeah, good old coffee recycling break. Probably wouldn't be a Ranching Reboot podcast without at least one of those. So we were talking about equipment, um, equipment and the future of ag. We just got done talking about some labor issues. And, it seems like, well, I'll let you go. I'll let you go.
The equipment issues is, man, stuff's just it is just flying high in price anymore. It's between shortages in the supply world, getting everything to the manufacturers, to the cost of those manufacturers. Now they're like, everybody's now wanting more and more money to work for them. It's like, and then they just pass it on down. They just pass it on down the line. You're not going to hurt their profit margin. They're going to get someplace.
Well, like
But the problem is,
it,
sorry.
when you go to like fast food, okay, that to me was the first example. People are like, "Well, we need $15 an hour minimum wage." Seems like that was like the 2019 narrative, and
Yep.
then in 2020, 2021, it's like, "Oh no, the minimum wage needs to be $25 an hour." Hold up, like if you want $25 an hour to flip burgers, you do not understand what that is going to do to everything else in 5 years. That makes everything else that much more expensive. When you make that assembly line worker that was getting paid $8 an hour, when that guy costs you $15 an hour now, guess what?
Mm-hmm.
Your cost of production goes up, which means your cost of goods sold goes up, which means you need to charge more for it, which means the consumer pays that price. Like it
Mm-hmm.
that's what I think people are like, a lot of people just totally miss that all costs in the economy are borne by the consumer at some point. And
Mm-hmm.
everything in our economy is made by a guy like you or me, or somebody driving a mining truck, or somebody working in a metals refinery. Like
Yep.
when we start adding in cost at the basic stages of production because the people on the consumption end can't afford shit, that's like we're eating our own tail.
Yep. The one thing that drives me nuts is hearing the words living wage. That is the most obnoxious term for me because it's so entirely subjective. What is a living wage? What do you need to live? Are you wanting, and how are you wanting to live? Are you wanting to live like Gandhi, where you could get by with probably about 35 cents an hour? Or are you wanting to live like a Kardashian who would probably need about $8,000 an hour? It's, and some people are so bad at their, managing their life. They could make $1 billion a year and still be broke. It, it's what is, I absolutely despise that term, living wage. Every, and where are you living? That's another thing. People out here like, oh, we need paid $25-$30 an hour out here. And I'm like, you do realize you can buy a house in one of these towns for like $45,000-$50,000, right? You go to Topeka, and that same house is probably 150,000-200,000. You go to Chicago, that house is probably 600.
I think your numbers might be a little bit low, but yeah, I get you.
It's the like I once talked to a certain individual in another town here, and I asked he was from Washington, and I was like, why did you come out here? Because I Google cheap places to live. He's like, Miltonville, Kansas is on that list. I'm like, huh, okay, cool. Can I get access to that list and delete it? But it's the I yeah, that term living wage, it gets me, that one gets me riled up.
Yeah, like how do you want to live? Like, what's a living wage to a guy, a homeless person? Like, is that a
Yeah.
living wage? A living wage to me, a living wage to Jeff Bezos. They're all very, very different things. And I, we live in a very, very strange time in humanity. Like, never in the history of humanity have we been wealthy enough where there are obese people in poverty that are unemployed.
Mm-hmm.
It, it,
And
that,
it's unreal.
If you brought somebody from 200 years ago to today and showed them the shape of people and how much we all weighed, they would just be blown away that there's that much extra food in the world.
Yeah. And at how much we throw away.
And, okay, that's a great point. We're the most efficient agriculture system, most productive agriculture system in the world. We still throw away 40% of our food. Like globally, 40% of food is wasted.
It's hard to wrap your head around that, isn't it? Just the metric tons that represents.
No, it's not hard. It's not hard. Okay. When we're at home and we're cooking and eating here at home, we don't throw food in the garbage. We set it aside for our chickens or we put it in the compost bin. And, so like I said, at the beginning, just got back from almost a week gone. We spent it in Santa Fe and we took a bunch of our own food. We cooked on our VRBO, I think 3-4 times. Had some great meals there. We only went out to eat, I think, 3 times the whole time we were there. There was food at the conference, of course, but so you go out to eat. We have a real nice meal. We're 8 hours from home. I'm not going to pack up half that burrito and put it in styrofoam to go back to my VRBO, to put it in the fridge, to put it in the cooler, to haul it back to Kansas. That's just silly.
Yep.
So where did it stay? It stayed there on the plate in the restaurant. And instead of going to a compost bin, it went to a garbage pile. Because okay, that's in town, that's in city, and they have waste disposal problems when people get dense. I think about things like that. About like I'm just sitting here thinking about the food that I bought that I didn't finish eating that went in the garbage can just over the last week. And that's a lot. And I'm not trying to waste food on purpose, but I'm also not going to eat myself sick just because it's there in front of me. You got to clean your plate. Like that wasn't the house I grew up in. That's probably why I weigh 175 instead of 275. But we kind of got away from the thread we were trying to chase, which was equipment. And where we got off here is I started talking about food minimum wage. So I think where I was going with that is, now you go into McDonald's and instead of 3 people behind that front counter, there's 1 guy and there's 4 computer screens out front. You could walk up to that thing and tap all the buttons, never have to talk to a human being until they scream your number out to go pick up your food.
Yep.
You can get on an app on your phone and order your food in the parking lot and go drive and park, and they'll bring your food out to you.
Yep.
And technology's great. Technology's great. But when we're using a lot of technology to replace basic human skills or basic human interactions, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. $25 an hour? You want $25 an hour to work at McDonald's? There's your replacement. It's the order kiosk. It's the online ordering app. That's your replacement. And when they come up with if McDonald's could come up with a robot that would assemble burgers, there would be nobody in the kitchen.
And they're working on there is a cannot remember. I watched a whole video series on it where this company, they actually have a fully autonomous kitchen. I believe it's in Vegas. It's 100% automated. A robot does everything in there. You can watch it do everything. And the only person that shows up is in the evening to clean and sterilize everything, make sure the robot's serviced and function for the next day. We're eliminating these base bottom level positions by demanding more than they're worth. Like you said, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. And now they're like, well, you need experience for this job. Well, what's your experience? Well, I can't get experience because, well, this job no longer exists because we were wanting $1 gazillion to do nothing, to do a bare minimum job.
Yeah. Oh, this is an entry level position that requires a college degree and 2 years of work experience.
Yeah.
I, wait a minute. That's not what entry level position means.
No. Yeah, that's we're seeing it already, and I think it's going to get worse. It comes back to this people feeling, like, well, I should be I'm entitled to a living wage. I'm entitled to X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, you're really not.
You're barely entitled to breathe air.
Yeah.
So the size of equipment, the issue with equipment is it's getting expensive. It's getting expensive because we've demanded all these capabilities. We want to be able to drive across this field with 1 centimeter precision. We want that tire track to be in the exact right spot. Okay, I get it. If we're always, if we're driving through the field and can place our tools with centimeter precision, that's good. If we have mapping that can, analyze fertility across the field, on even a meter block, and correctly apply what it needs to be applied on that grid. We're being more efficient, we're saving money. But it's a side effect of the get big or get out mentality. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Labor has been our problem in agriculture for 40 years. And what we do is we just try to invent new technologies so that one labor unit that we all want to run a farm with, ourselves, because every problem is a people problem, and people are hard to deal with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hard to find the right person, hard to get them trained, hard to trust them, and when they screw up, it's bad. So instead of that's been the trend in farming, is remove the need to move manure from one place to the fields to transfer fertility, right? We got rid of that because we got synthetics. We got to reduce our manpower because that's just a big expense. So we keep getting bigger tractors so one guy can do more work. So we replace labor with machinery. And that's been a trade-off that I've seen through the last 100 or so years of history.
Mm-hmm.
And we're to the point that things are just so complex, we can't work on them. I know I've seen several of your videos, problems with John Deere stuff, and I happen to call a service truck just because the machine won't tell you what's wrong and you can't find out. So you got to pay somebody over $100 an hour to come tell you what's wrong with your machine. I I think that's a really terrible position that we've put ourselves in. And I'm there too. I own some John Deere green, and hopefully I can get rid of it in the next few years and get another color that might actually let me work on it. I don't know. I guess I'm just rambling now.
Well, as far as the color goes, honestly, I stand by that one video I made where pretty much everything's the same anymore. I don't care what color it is, and the color rivalry just makes me it's almost as bad as the Ford Chevy thing anymore. I'm like, I don't really care. Like they all use like Ford and Chevy, they all use the CP4 injector pump that it likes to grenade at any moment. That's everything's overly complex. It's all the same. It does the same thing. It gets you the same place. I'm like, I don't really care. Only thing I really care about is parts and service, and that's honestly is the only reason why I'm green. Like, I don't have any case anywhere around an AGCO's parts distribution network. If anyone from AGCO is listening, your parts distribution network is garbage. Please fix it.
I'll back that up. I'll back up that statement.
And I live 20 miles away from an AGCO manufacturing plant.
I'll say this. John Deere does have a really great parts network. Like, if you need a John Deere part and it exists in the country, you can probably get it tomorrow. Which that's really nice. But it also seems like John Deere's need that part system behind them because they break down a lot. And it seems like maybe there's some other colors that might be a little more reliable.
Yeah, and I can't speak to the other colors on that. I know they all break down eventually. But yeah, the deer really likes to like. There's one thing I do enjoy about this, like the red side of things. Good old Case IH. There's a lot of common parts, common bearings and stuff that I've noticed. That's a buddy of mine. He runs Case, and it was Sunday afternoon. He lost a bearing, and he goes, "Oh, I'll just run over to the farm store and grab another one." I'm like, "I'm sorry, what?" I'm not familiar with this concept. I usually have to call someone in or just wait till Monday. And he's like, "No, no, no, that's just an industry standard bearing." I'm again, I don't know what you're talking about. Can you?
What?
That's
What are you
not
talking
something you
about?
get a lot.
Two
Yeah,
hundred thousand dollar piece of machinery with common industrial parts on it? What
yeah,
madness
that's
is this?
make it easy to work on. Oh no. Yeah, the year that our S670 was shut down because of one board in it, I was just like, "Are you kidding me?" Now, thankfully, the kid that worked on it, he's a smart kid, and he is a great way. He's like, "Well, that computer is the same as the computer on the other side. They just utilize different parts of the machine of the unit. I'm going to flip them around for you." He goes, because the part that's still good on this one will be used. He goes, and the part that's bad won't be used on theirs. He goes, "I'll just flip them around." He got me working again. Now, granted, I had to pay, the service call, $150 an hour, and then, all of a sudden, it's still a gigantic bill, but I wasn't shut down for a week and a half waiting on a computer in 2020.
It was like an $800 bill for 2 hours. It was like, oh, we'll just put this over here and put this over here. Oh, you're working again.
Yeah. Granted, I was happy to get back after it, but at the same time, I was like, wow, that was expensive, and I probably could have done that. Dang it.
But then the flip side of that is they say, oh, well, that service technician is providing a very valuable job. That's highly skilled. And without him, these farmers would all be shut down. And we say, well, wait a minute. If we just maybe take a couple steps backwards to like, I don't know, the 9870 days and get out of these S670s, maybe we'd have a machine that would run and be reliable. Or maybe, God forbid, we go back to the 9610 days.
Whoa, 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 whoa. We can't. No, that's crazy talk. That's,
Hey,
I love those Walker machines.
I remember when the 9600s came out. I'd been running a 7720, and those 9600s looked like a spaceship.
Yep. That's my uncle ran a 7720, and that was the first combine I ever learned to cut on. And I thought that was the coolest thing. All these big levers and everything all over the place. And the to turn your auger on is that big lever by the door, big with the hell handle. I'm like, this is so cool. And then you hop into the 9500, which we had at the time too, and I'm like, this isn't even the same machine. Like, it doesn't make sense. And then now, like, I love my dad to death, but I don't trust him in the S670. Every time he gets in it, he breaks something. Like, after my concussion, I'm like, please don't break anything. He's like, oh no, I got through harvest. I didn't break anything else. And I look as we're putting stuff away, I see the augers, the headers got a bunch of bent things on the reel, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to fix all that now.
Yeah, I I won't share any of the dad tore stuff up stories that I've got saved up. We'll wait. We'll keep waiting for those for a while.
Fair enough.
So, politics in the future of ag.
Ooh, that one. I honestly, I was expecting a lot more of a spicier response than I got from that one. I was actually a little disappointed in how that video went and how that video performed. I don't know if the TikTok overlords like that, or if they what the deal was on that one, because that didn't perform all that well. Uh, I'm future politics of agriculture is just maddening. Like, I just, like, on one hand, like, the arguments on crop insurance and stuff like that, being subsidized by the taxpayers. So, by the way, thank you, all the taxpayers. Um, like, I don't have such a problem with that, because ensuring that the nation's food supply by keeping the farmers able to still put food on their table and provide for their families and not have to sell out to some big conglomerate, I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, there's some arguments to be made about how the system works, and it is broken beyond belief, especially for like the vegetable guys. Like, I was a big vegetable grower from California. He was walking through why they don't use any sort of crop insurance with their asparagus and onions and stuff like that. He said there's no point. It doesn't help. That needs fixed. Like, maybe, I don't know.
Would you
But
would you rather see some of the crop insurance money, the pot of money that's that goes for non-edible crops like corn, soybeans? Okay, yeah, they feed cows. Whatever. We can really get into the math on that sometime later if anybody wants to, of how much corn and soybeans actually goes to feed cows. Well, what if we took some of that money and started channeling it over to people that are growing lettuce and peppers and squash and beans and asparagus and onions and made it easier for them? So we'd have maybe, I don't know, a little bit. I don't know if that'd make our food supply any healthier or any better in the long run, but I don't think it'll do anything bad.
no, I don't think that would be a bad thing. And also, the market right now is so laser focused into corn and soybeans. Once you get up out of Kansas, it's just corn and soybeans, beans and corn and beans. And there's no market for anything else because that's the market's incentivized to stay protected. So the market's like, okay, well, the money's in corn and beans right now because corn and beans are protected. That's all we're going to mess with right now. Like, I looked into growing food grade sorghum a while back. My nearest plant to get that to a is Dodge City. That's like 3 hours of driving to get there, and it is not a fun drive to get to Dodge. And by the time I ran the math, by the time I put it in a bin, stored it, because I couldn't, it was either I was going to have to put it in a bin and store it and haul it myself, or hire a trucking company to come do it. By the time I did all of that and paid their dead load back, there was no money in it for me. I had no market for it. And I would love to find a better market. Like, I got a buddy down by Wichita who apparently there's somebody that some sort of company that's wanting to see mung beans. They're wanting to see some bean soups, the hard shell beans you buy in the stores and stuff like that. They're wanting more of those, and they're trying to get more into the market of that. I'd like to see more of that around the country, and a little less, yeah, I and like you said, yeah, I get it. Corn and beans feed cows, kind of. There seems to be soybean oil in almost everything anymore. If you're allergic to soy, I find soy in wheat bread. I'm like, how the hell did that get into the wheat bread? But I don't know. I think if we could. Honestly, I just want the government out of a lot of things in general, because I don't like the government putting pressure on different parts of the market, because the government's terrible at that. They've never been any good at picking winners and losers. They're the worst at it. And I don't know. I just kind of want them out of the way to just let us be able to produce and not have to have them on our backs about everything all the time.
Be careful. You're starting to sound like a libertarian.
Oh, I know. That's there's a reason why I've got a copy of Atlas Shrugged sitting on top of my piano here. That's that Ayn Rand and I go way back.
Fair enough. I knew we'd get along.
But like it drives me nuts. Like with industrial hemp, with this politics side of things, like I was so excited when they're like, we're in, the USDA is like, hey, we're wanting people to try to start growing, industrial hemp. We've got these steps you got to go through, but we can license it out now. You can start growing it. I'm like, oh, heck yeah. Like, I love the industrial applications of industrial hemp. Roof tiles, you have that hemp fiber holding your tiles together. just, I mean, hemp and clothing, shoes, it's such a durable fiber. Then the oil, there's a lot of good uses for hemp oil. And
Makes good cow
then
food too.
yep. And I started looking through the license process, which again, I started smelling toast because I thought I was having a stroke reading it. It was like $10,000 just to get started with this process. And then you had to pay another fee, which was almost 5 figures or something like that, by the time you were done with it. And then they had to come out and test it. And you were responsible for paying all the testing. And then if one plant tested hot, well, then they just nuked the whole thing. And you're just basically out all of that. And the process behind it is so ridiculous, and there's so much red tape. I'm just like, good Lord, get out of our way and just let us grow stuff. Like, and a guy out here actually tried it, and when he realized, oh crap, I can't spray any pesticides on this stuff. This is supposed to be for, all natural, blah blah blah, CBD, blah blah blah, and he hired a bunch of high school kids to come and pull weeds and to knock the plants with a stick to knock the bugs off and stuff like that. He got in trouble because those kids did not have a background check. All those kids that were working for him were supposed to have a background check. And he's like, there's 16 kids here that I'm paying like $8, $10 an hour or something like that to just, they're knocking on, I gotta pay for he's like, nope. I know another guy made it work by running ducks through it. I thought that was kind of neat, letting the ducks run through and eat all the bugs. That was a very unique, out of the box style thinking. And I know he's made it work, but then it got hot and the THC levels were too high, and all of that was just gone.
Probably might have had some happy ducks for a while before he had to burn it down.
Right. But that's something I want the government to get out of the, like this, all this stuff is just stifling innovation and just slowing us down. Let's let us loose. Farmers are very creative people. Like if Elon wants someone to go to Mars with his group, you take a farmer who can fix anything with duct tape and some baling wire. We'll get your rocket there. That's one way or another. It'll get there.
Might not be pretty. It might not all be the same color. Might have a few leaks, but it'll get there.
It'll get there. Exactly. But it's all about now. It's all about, keeping your different groups happy in Washington. You've got your Farm Bureau, no offense to Farm Bureau and all these other folks, whatever.
I'll offend Farm Bureau. I don't care.
Okay. But it's all about, keeping all these groups happy. And that's all these lobbying groups are now for, is just keeping the other groups happy instead of actually advocating for the individual farmer and our individual needs. It's always, we need more we need more of this, we need more of this, instead of maybe we just need to just get out of their way and let them work.
Well, that's not what governments ever do, Tyler. A government governments don't give up power once they've taken it. They don't give up authority. They won't. The only thing more permanent than a temporary government program is a permanent government program.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Was it Reagan that said there's nothing so close to immortality as a temporary government program?
Sounds like something he probably said.
And it's just, yeah, I get so tired and looking at the farm bill. Like, I know why the farm bill is structured the way it is. You're never going to get a clean farming bill passed. Like, if you were to say, hey, we're not gonna put all this SNAP stuff, that's going to be its own bill. It's going to be called the SNAP bill. And then we're going to have the actual farm bill. That farm bill, it's a political calculation, because that bill would either A, not pass, B, be terrible, which it already is, but more terrible, or the worst option yet, it would just get co-opted to just absolutely destroy agriculture.
I can make the argument that the farm bill is and isn't destroying agriculture.
Yeah.
There's guardrails in there. The farm bill sets out, how much money is going to go for crop insurance, for commodity crops, for corn, for wheat, for beans, for cotton, for, whatever edible crops are insurable. And, the people that say, oh, you can't tell me how to farm. Really? Really?
Yeah.
So you're farming that corn, soybean, and wheat oscillation, and nobody told you to do that. But that's what everybody else around you is doing. You plant the same time as your neighbors. You harvest the same time as your neighbors. You work ground just like your neighbors. You sell your crops to the same places as you do your neighbors.
Yep. Congratulations, you're doing what they tell you to, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah, I mean it's not like the bank. You show up to the banker and the banker's like, "Oh, you want to grow sunflowers and lavender this year? Oh, that's fine. Go right ahead." No, they want to know what you're growing. They want to know what your average is that you got to beat. They want to know that you made your crop in. They want to know that crop is insured so that you'll at least get that minimum, that average minimum payment. They want their money back. They're in business to make money. They're not in the business of just giving money away so people can grow food and grow lavender. They got to make money, which, okay, that's reasonable. So the banker and the crop insurance guy kind of have you siloed into a few things. Well, then you go to your crop consultant. Your crop consultant, he's just going to tell you to buy stuff and put on there. It's just a treadmill. And it's hard for me to see a big change in the commodity system. I think where I see the change is in the small holders coming in and starting new farms on a small scale.
Yeah. Or some sort of market innovation that is just too groundbreaking to ignore. That's there. Every now and then you'll get something that'll just, some new innovation, something that'll just shake up the market. So like, that's the thing I'm waiting for the most, like with automation, is there's something that is going to come eventually that will just shake the market so much that all of a sudden things will change. I don't know what it is, when it is, if automation is that, or if something else is that. But that would be the only thing besides, a nuclear winter that's really going to change how things are run.
We're talking about automation. We've been talking about some of the problems, and automation is one of the things you kind of have some hope for. And I'm not going to say we're running short on time. We have all the time we want, but like, I've got shit I need to go do out at the ranch. I was thinking of automation, and just like a movie kind of flashed into my head. And let's just say it's you. So you get up in the morning, your first stop is the laptop, and you type out all the instructions, or you set up all the instructions for your automated machinery to go out and do the stuff for the day. And you take your phone that's got like the monitoring software on it. You can tell where all your tractors are, make sure they've got fuel, they're not overheating, they're working hard. Like, okay, cool. You put that back in your pocket, and then you get to go to your vegetable garden. And you get to work in your vegetable garden by hand all day. And you go out and you tend your sheep and your goats, and you check the pigs and go walk by the milk cow. And every few minutes you can pull out your phone and look and see, make sure your tractors are still doing okay. Then at the end of the day, you check, make sure your tractors are going to be okay. Well, we'll park that one for the night. We'll park that one for the night. And you got too much work to do, so you're going to be disking all night or planting or whatever. Automation and technology are a double-edged sword for me. So here's the context that I like to think about it. A lot of people like to talk about, the fence collars or no fence, or the virtual fencing collars, which, don't get me wrong, that's a really cool bit of technology. So we look at, what does that technology do? It controls the movement of livestock. Yes, it can report back health data. Yes, you can get back a lot of really interesting data from it. But the basic function of that piece of technology is going to be to control the movement of that animal. Okay? So, what other things do we have that can control the movement of an animal? We can set up barbed wire around it. We could run a string of poly wire around it.
Mm-hmm.
Or we could keep somebody out there living with the cattle to herd them around all day. So the same mechanism can be accomplished with a very, very low technology operation, which is a guy on foot with a stick.
Mm-hmm.
Can be accomplished with some medium level technology like barbed wire or poly wire or step in post, or we can accomplish it with a fully unlocked technology tree and a lot of energy to replicate the same simple tasks that we could do on foot.
Yeah, I've never quite gotten behind the virtual fencing thing. It's just it didn't work. It doesn't work for my dog, and I'm like, if it isn't going to work for my dog, who will, she goes and retrieves stuff for me. She listens to me. If she won't listen to that, I don't see a lot of I don't see cows respecting it. I have a really hard time getting on board with that piece of tech. And you're right. I think it's a lot. It's a very complicated solution to no problem at all. Really, it's not hard to put up some polywire. I'm not a huge fan of barbed wire anymore, just because of how stupid expensive it is, and I've got way too many cuts and injuries sustained from it to really enjoy it anymore. I'm starting to lean more into high tensile stuff, but it's so much simpler and easier just to take care of it that way. It's but where I was seeing where I'm so happy about the automation potential is, you know, I would love to be able to plant while I'm harvesting. It's I don't have enough people to do that right now. I can't find skilled people to do it. So but at the same time, it's that double-edged sword you're talking about. I'm not hiring somebody. I'm not looking, I'm replacing a labor pool with technology. But at the same time, I don't have that labor pool, so I need the technology. I'm almost in like a catch 22.
And the more we rely on that technology, the smaller that labor pool is going to get.
Right. But and then the more we're going to need it. It almost just it's a almost never ending merry-go-round. But I like that, like that Omni power system that I was talking about. Like I'm like, I could have one machine that could do three different tasks all by itself. That one thing could replace, and it runs on a smaller engine than what, like even my planting tractor right now, it runs on a smaller engine than the tractor I'm using right now. And it does just as much work. It does actually could do more work than mine does. And then they designed it to be easy to work on, so a farmer can actually work on the thing. Like when I saw it at Husker Harvest Days, like we were pulling panels off and just looking at how it was all the hoses and wires and stuff around. I'm like, well, hell, that makes a lot of sense. Did a farmer design this? This actually looks like I could work on it. That's I don't know. I'm kind of rambling on this one. Sorry, but yeah, I'm really excited, but I'm worried, but excited at the same time. I love new technologies and what it could mean for me. Like right now, I have so many projects that I'm working on. I just don't have. There's not enough hours in the day, and I see this as a way to let me like I want to do more cross fencing in our pastures. I want to do more cross fencing when I'm grazing in cover crops. I want to be able to build some water infrastructure in places. I can't do that because I'm stuck in a tractor. And if I can get out of that tractor and I can go do some of these other projects, well, now I don't have to hire them done. And yes, that's now taking away work from someplace else, but allows me to have more freedom to mold my operation the way I want it molded and to go, cut some trees. So I don't have everybody on TikTok yelling at me for having cedar trees and thorn trees in my pastures.
Hey, I've laid off. Like
I know you have. I saw one guy in there on my last video about taking the cows. I was like, good God, you need to cut all your trees. I'm like, yeah, I'll get right on that.
yeah, I mean, on the to-do list, it just might be 2 or 3 years down on the to-do list.
Yeah, it's number 6,342, and I'm on 6.
We get there someday. Like I'm watching them grow back on my place. I'm watching some little babies come, and I'll put my hand in my pocket and I'll feel my Bic lighter and I'll look at that little tree going, soon, soon.
I wish we could do some burning around here. That's been a real thorn in our everyone's side around here. We've been in burn bans now, just almost constant for the last 5, 6 years now. Just
I tell you what, I'll try to remember after we get off here to send you some resources. Jewel County should be what, one or two to the west of you?
yep, they're just actually right next door.
They've got a they've had a really good prescribed burn association. Okay, I don't know
Mhm.
if they still have it. I went up
They
there
do.
like 12 or 14 years ago to help them set up their prescribed burn association.
They do, and it's fantastic. They do a lot of good work over there.
Okay. Well, like I was gonna say, like maybe I need to come up and help drag some of those Jewel County boys a little bit to the east and help you get some fire on your stuff.
Yeah, that's I actually looked. There's a couple different places down by Manhattan that they're for hire burn people. I'm like, don't tempt me. I'll just hire you to come up here as soon as can get the commissioners to lift their burn ban, and we'll start setting the whole county on fire.
Well, kind of where I was going with that was our burn association here in Barber County. We have an agreement with our fire chief and our fire board. Like, even if
Oh,
there's a burn ban and we think we can get it done safely, we can do that as long as we're willing to accept the risk.
oh wow.
And we usually would have more trucks on a burn than the fire department could respond with within the first hour. So I, I'm not going to say we have a perfect record. We've lost fires. We've generally gotten a hold of them before they've gotten more than about, let's see, if we have a 700-acre fire, we might have an escape. If it's 7 acres, that's less than an escape of less than 10% of what you're planning on burning. Like, that's not that bad of a deal. And
Yeah.
we've never had an escape where it's got out and caused like any damage, like killed any livestock or burn up anybody's houses. We've never done anything like that. Just burn up somebody's grass, and people are usually like, "Yeah, whatever, no problem." But I mean, it can be a deal, and if you don't have a lot of good fire culture, um, it can take time to build up that trust with your emergency managers, with the fire department, and it's been a long road. Like 13 years ago, our county fire chief did not want anything to do with us. And in that period of time, we've gotten enough of the guys on the fire department to come out and watch us burn or help us burn because some of them are, also landowners. They've started carrying drip torches on the real fire trucks and learned how to use backfires and flank
Hmm.
fires to move a head fire around. And it's kind of nice. Actually, in fact, we had Anderson Creek here in 2016, which was bad. And after 2016, like there were, I'm not going to say backroom deals, but there were some agreements made like, hey, you call us, we'll light up our radio network and we'll roll with all of our trucks, like all of our PBA trucks. Like if you need us bad, we can roll in with our own radio network, with our own support, and just give us an area. Just give us an area. If you want us to patrol and mop up on the backside of the fire, we will do that because we're good at that and we know how to work together and we have our own communication. So we've sent we've sent we call it a task group. We've sent a task group from our Prescribed Burn Association out 3 times since 2017 to go help on big fires.
Oh wow. Yeah, the what just kind of infuriates me around here. We try to burn co-op a while back, and it got started off with some promise. We had a couple of guys come in and do some really good, lecturing, and we actually did some practical burns and stuff like that. And then the first year we did a couple of good burns, And some of us actually, like my family, we went and bought a brush truck from Lincoln County. One of those that got caught in a fire, kind of messed it up a little bit, hurt one of the guys on it, and they're like, no, bad juju, we don't want it. So we're like, oh, we'll take it and we'll use it. And so we put all that money into a brush truck, and then there was a couple other people, and then all of a sudden it just seemed to just stall out. No one's like, I'm not, well, once you burn my pasture, I'm busy. Oh, once you burn my pasture, I'm busy. We're like, well, no, you agreed for this. We're like, well, I'll see you in court then. And they just left. I'm like, come on now. That's or everybody's wanting to burn, but yet we can't get anyone to work together on it. And no one will put any money into it. And goodness, it was just all of a sudden it just turned into an absolute unadulterated mess. And then it ended up with us actually a fire that I was helping work. We lost a fire, but we were burning just a nice little 80-acre pasture. We were done. We were just doing some mop up. Wind shifted bad, and all of a sudden we started getting dirt devils everywhere, and it just picked up all of the embers, threw them all into the next pasture, and the wind shifted hard on us. Was not in the forecast at all, and it went 9 miles before we were able to finally get it stopped.
Wow.
And that day, I had a feeling the Grim Reaper was like just kind of standing behind me, just kind of waiting. He just had his finger just like that day. I nearly met my end a couple of times that day because we got hung up in some fire, and then I got yeeted off the back of a truck, and there's some mileage on my frame anymore.
I've had some similar days on the back of a fire truck or in the cab of a fire truck. Yes. That's difficult to understand. That a situation like that might only happen a couple times in a lifetime, but it leaves a mark on a fella.
It did. And it basically made a whole bunch of people like, yeah, we're not doing these anymore. And the county commissioners were like, yeah, when we say a burn ban, we mean a burn ban. Like, and they will cut, like the county's like, we will issue citations. We will issue, like, they are like, they're not messing around with it. And then a lot of it is because we've got a couple of guys that light up them all, bro, and toss it out to the field and just walk away. And then they're like, oh no, it's on fire. Better call the fire department.
Yeah, that's not the kind of fire culture that's really a very healthy thing for any area.
No. And it's just now just kind of balled itself up. I don't know how to unsnap. I've been trying to talk to a couple different people to try to unsnarl this, try to figure out some different resources. I'll take any help you can, any literature, resources, any direction you can give me, so I can start trying to talk to a couple other people to try to figure something out, to get something going, because so many people have got a bad taste in their mouth. No one wants to even move. Like, everyone's too scared to move on it because no one wants to be that guy that sets the county on fire again.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand how people can get there. You know, I can really understand how people can get there, and it's a lot of fear. It's boomers not having experience with fire and maybe seeing a couple bad fires in their life and not understanding it, and not knowing that it is a tool that can be very beneficial when properly applied. It can also be a tool that can go wildly wrong if you're deficient in the planning process.
Yep.
So, there's Kansas Prescribed Fire Council, Kansas Prescribed Burn Association would be the two places I would start. I don't know off the top of my head who your regional prescribed fire coordinator would be. We've got a couple of funded positions in the state that are worked through I can't remember if it's the Prescribed Burn Association or the Prescribed Fire Council. They're actually two different bodies, and we set it up that way on purpose. So we've got the Prescribed Burn Association, which is mostly the landowners, and it has daughter associations and chapters throughout the state, and we're actually the guys that are going and burning it. The Prescribed Fire Council is something that I helped get started up like a year or two after we started the Prescribed Burn Association. So we started the council as a place to dump all the agency folks and the NGOs, like, Fish and Wildlife and Pheasants and Quail Forever and Kansas Forest Service. We put them all in the prescribed fire council to work on the legislative and governmental side of things. And we left the association kind of a little more pure, I guess, so we wouldn't be polluted with all the NGOs and the government guys wanting the association to do things.
Yeah.
But,
okay. That's interesting.
Yeah, those would be the two resources. And get in touch with whatever your prescribed fire coordinator is for your area. The gentleman that serves this area is a guy named Jess Crockford, and Jess is amazing. Like, he's very much a pyromaniac, but he's very good at hiding it.
Nice. I guess it comes with the territory there.
When Jess shows up on burn day in his little Ford F-150 and unloads his four-wheeler and he puts on his yellow gear, it's like, I know where I can put you, sir, and I know it'll be done right.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I got to get out of here. I need to go do some work. It's been way too long since I've done any actual ranch work. So what would you like to end with?
It's don't be afraid of change. Don't be afraid to get outside your comfort zone. Start small, but keep trying. Don't be afraid to change. Just keep trying something new, and you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish just by staying current, staying new, trying something different. You never know what you're going to stumble onto. You may stumble onto something that'll change your whole mindset.
Awesome. Great stuff. Where can people find you if they want to connect or harass you or tell you you're wrong?
Well, at the moment, I'm just mostly on TikTok. I do have a Facebook and an Instagram, but they've been largely inactive just because there's not enough hours in the day anymore. Although I hope to change that. Right now, just mostly TikTok. You can find me at JTech Farms. I also have my email in my bio. So again, if you want to tell me how wrong I am and you're that dedicated, go ahead and shoot me an email. I may ignore it.
Fair enough. Glad you didn't ignore the email I sent you to do this podcast with me.
Right? I thank you for having me on. I had a blast. I hope we can meet up at Soil Health U in January. I'm planning on being there. I've already told the old man, I'm like, hey, just BT dubs. I'm gone this day.
Awesome.
Just expect.
I don't know if I've got my tickets or hotel for Soil Health U, but it's definitely on the calendar.
Yeah. And then I've also got a I keep wanting to say it's a guest lecture, but it's not. I'm doing a presentation at Green Cover's Iola conference in, I think that's the 29th and 30th of November. I'm doing a presentation on cover crops, crop rotation, stuff like that. I'm on there, and I'll be on their panel for Q&A afterwards. Hoping to do a live and stuff like that while I'm out there as well.
Very cool. So that's just coming up in a couple weeks. This episode should be out before then. So hopefully somebody will come up to you and say, hey, I heard you on Ranching Reboot.
Awesome. Well, I had a great time, Brian. Thank you for the invite. This was a ton and a half of fun. I hope we can do it again.
We're going to have to, because I only got through like half the stuff on my sheet. Like, we didn't even talk about, your monuments to tax avoidance, your solar off-grid shop. We didn't really get into cedar trees. We didn't even talk about drones or coffee. So we got plenty of crap to talk about.
Oh, my gosh. I could talk about a lot about coffee.
I talk about how much I love to drink it.
Exactly. Been drinking it since I was 2.
That's a few years. I got hooked on it when I was in the Navy, but that's another story.
For another time.
All right. Well, Tyler, thank you. It has been a lot of fun, and we'll definitely continue this some other time. And listeners, go get it. We'll see you next week. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our podcast. We'd also love to hear your thoughts, so leave us a review if you haven't already. And don't forget to check out the Q&A and the polls on Spotify. Your support helps us bring more enlightening conversations and fresh stories from the world of farming and ranching. Thank you for listening to Ranching Reboot. your favorite regenerative ag podcast.